Did Beto O'Rourke say something that's playing into the hands of Republicans?
Yes. Look, right now, we have an amazing moment on our hands. We have agreement among the American people for not just universal background checks, but we have a majority in favor of red flag laws, high-capacity magazines, banning the new sale of assault weapons. This is a golden moment to finally do something, because we've been arguing about this for as long as I've been alive. When even this president and even Mitch McConnell are at least pretending to be open to reforms, we know that we have a moment on our hands. Let's make the most of it and get these things done.
So that's Mayor Pete Buttigieg weighing in on fellow 2020 candidate Beto O'Rourke's comments during last week's primary debate that the government should take away some guns. O'Rourke reacted. We'll have that in just a moment. But that reaction that Mayor Pete has is very similar to what you've been saying.
Well, yeah, and I think most people who are interested in increased background checks, that would be 95% of Americans, and people who are interested in military-style weapons being taken off the streets, don't want this conversation to move towards what Beto O'Rourke said about confiscation of guns, because, first of all, that will never happen. It will never happen. Secondly, all that you do is you play into the hands of 3 lobbyists in Washington, D.C. for the gun lobby, who will try to scare everybody across the country to try to move them away from universal background checks, to try to move them away from a ban on military-style weapons.
Which, as Mayor Pete was saying, would miss the moment. So Beto O'Rourke reacted to Buttigieg, tweeting, quote, leaving millions of weapons of war on the streets because Trump and McConnell are at least pretending to be open to reforms. That calculation and fear is what got us here in the first place. Let's have the courage to say what we believe and fight for it. Meanwhile, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer spoke to Trump by phone yesterday for roughly 10 minutes to discuss expanding background checks. Joining us now, member of the House Armed Services and Intelligence Committee, Republican Congressman Mike Turner of Ohio. He has come out in support of restricting military-style weapon sales, magazine limits, and red flag laws following the mass shooting in Dayton, Ohio. Also with us, Associate Editor of Commentary Magazine and MSNBC contributor Noah Rothman.
So Congressman, we just tried to summarize your view on some of these issues that more and more Americans, more and more Republicans are supporting. Why don't we let you actually speak for yourself and tell us what your views are?
Well, thank you. I think if you look at the tragedy that occurred in Dayton, Ohio, where you had a mass murderer who passed background checks, he was able to buy his weapons after having completed background checks, where all of the normal stories that we hear after these events surfaced later, where friends and others indicated there were signs where he had openly said he wanted to be a mass shooter. And you had also the most perfect of circumstances in that you had police presence, you had unbelievable heroism by the police that were there, who responded immediately. They had the appropriate weapons. He had on armament. They had armor-piercing bullets. They were able to take down the shooter within 32 seconds. But still, even in all those circumstances, 9 people died, 27 people were injured in 32 seconds. So you can't just say, oh, well, if we arm everyone, this will be addressed, because the police were there and they immediately took him out. You can't just say background checks, because clearly background checks in this instance failed the system. But you do have a situation where someone is identified as a threat, is allowed to continue into the community, and ultimately inflicted unbelievable horror on a community.
And that's, so many people are talking about these red flag laws. Even David French, who certainly has been a strong advocate for Second Amendment rights, even more than me on issues regarding background checks and military-style weapons. He talked about these red flag laws. A lot of very respected conservatives have. I'm wondering if you're starting to sense among Republicans a shift, a bit of a shift, especially when you look at the polls. Do members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, recognize that almost 9 out of 10 Republicans across the country support expanded background checks, that a majority of Americans support a ban on military-style weapons, and also, of course, a majority of Republicans support these red flag laws?
Well, I think this is a bipartisan issue because even now you don't see on the Democrat side them bringing forth military-style weapon bans at this point. Nancy Pelosi's been Speaker now, in over a 5-year period, off and on, and has not brought forth that type of legislation. But I think the shift that we're seeing as a result, that we're seeing a shift in what's occurring. If you'll recall, if you look at this from a historical basis, when the original assault ban went into place under Bill Clinton, it went into place because our police were facing these weapons and did not have the appropriate protection. They were being outgunned, if you will. And that was in place for 10 years. By the time that it expired, the circumstances had changed. Our police had been appropriately equipped. But people did not have the concern that we see now, that these weapons being used not against our police and our police being outgunned, but just our ordinary citizens. That shift, that concern of what is happening to American values, that an individual could use a weapon against people that they do not know and cause unbelievably horrific damage and an unbelievable impact to a community. I think that's what's causing the shift, and I think it's appropriate.
Congressman, Dayton is in your district. So 2 questions. First, just give us an update. What is the healing process there like after a tragedy like this?
Well, I thank you for asking that. Whenever this happens to a community, the entire community feels it. I mean, this was our entertainment district, our restaurant and community district, our historic area. So there were thousands of people that were down there, including my own daughter. And so if you think of the multiplication of the thousands of stories of people who were touched, who there, and then the community itself, where it impacts the spirit of the community. I got to give Dave Chappelle credit. He hosted a concert down at the event. 20,000 people came. We reclaimed the space in the area as the community. But I think with any community that goes through this, they really do feel it deeply. It certainly hits the spirit of the community.
Congressman, maybe you can allay some concerns about background checks, universal background checks. You said it's not a silver bullet, of course, but it's certainly on the table, and people wonder why, given its 85–90% support, it has not happened. The concerns, as I understand them, are taking the Manchin Toomey example, for example. If a sale goes to a private individual who it's not advertised online or in print, then you can go ahead with that sale without registering as a federal seller. To do that, to force that to become a federal seller, a lot of those sales would still go through absent the federal check, and then all of a sudden you have a lot more illegal weapons in the population than you had before. Is that, as you understand it, the principal background problem with that?
Well, I think people are for increased background checks. Certainly closing the gun show loophole, looking at internet sales. I think that the legislation, as you've indicated, that people have concern is where it goes to transactions between individuals where they know the individual personally, family members. But I think in this instance, it really is going to take the president to step in, and he's going to apparently this week and indicate what he's going to support, because people don't want to keep sending legislation through that doesn't have a chance for passage. This is a time where I think the American people have a grave concern about what's happening in their communities, and this is one where if we do come together as a bipartisan basis, if the president says what he's willing to support, then legislation can be fashioned that becomes law and not merely just partisan debates and lobbying of bills.
Congressman, I think the fact that Dayton has shown a model for healing is something all of us salute. But I think we also need to come with a consensus, as you said, of where we can battle this together. My problem with Beto's suggestion is, how's it going to be executed? From my point of view, from a civil rights point of view, you start kicking in doors. I'm going to get 500 complaints a week that I was profiled. So what can we do to move your party and the president towards some kind of mid-ground to deal with this? Because Americans of all backgrounds are concerned. I don't think we need to go to the extreme, but we need to do something and something right away.
Right. Well, I think his comments certainly were concerning. I support the Second Amendment, and I think even with the Second Amendment, we've recognized that there are limitations to the Second Amendment. You can't have a tank. You can't have a machine gun. It really is just a technology issue. Where are we going to have the debate as to where that limit occurs? And I think now that we're having in civil society these mass murders, that we need to address also the issue of mental health, the issue of how do we identify these individuals, what happens in the virtual world, where these people are clearly receiving training. They're all behaving in a manner that's very similar when you watch the videos. My daughter said, watch the videos. They are all behaving in the same manner. Clearly, this is something that's happening in the virtual world that we need to address. But it's both parties. There's not legislation passing from Nancy Pelosi on military-style weapons at this point. I think it's going to require a bipartisan discussion, and I think the president, hopefully this week, is going to take that opportunity to help fashion the discussion so we can say, what can we do on a bipartisan basis, and let's do it right away.
And boy, I tell you what Reverend Al said, what the congressman said, exactly right. There needs to be a middle ground in this approach, because as Reverend Al said, it's not just Republicans that would be upset if the police started kicking down doors. Reverend Al would be hearing about it, and a lot of leaders would be hearing from it too. So going back to what Beto had suggested, that I think Mayor Pete understands just won't work. That's not the middle ground approach I think we're looking for. Congressman Mike Turner, thank you so much for being with us. And boy, know that our thoughts and our prayers are with you and your family and your community in this time of healing.
And up next, we'll talk to Senator Gary Peters of Michigan after auto workers went on strike against GM overnight. Morning Joe is back in a moment.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.